Shooter fans, if you're looking for something a little different, here's your game.
Yeousch!
For history will repeat itself. Unless our destiny lies within another.
Metro Last Light is a first-person shooter with some light RPG and survival horror elements. It comes to us from 4A Games and is a direct sequel to 2010's Metro 2033. Both games were inspired by the novel Metro 2033 by Dmitry Glukhovsky, set in a post-apocalyptic Moscow where the Earth's surface has been turned into a poisonous, radioactive wasteland after a nuclear war that happens in late 2013. The survivors have retreated to the underground where they call the Metro tunnels their home. The first game did a lot of cool things. It had minimal HUD elements and fantastic visuals to provide an extremely immersive atmosphere. Military-grade bullets were the only form of currency in the game, used to purchase cheaper, weaker, handmade ammunition and supplies. But it had its fair share of rough edges. Shooting felt loose and inaccurate. Stealth sections felt very linear, frustrating, and based on trial and error. The narrative, while fascinating in plot, didn't come through as clearly in delivery. But the atmosphere of the game completely saved it. It was one of the most immersive shooters I had ever played up until then, and it was a different take on a genre that felt like it was starting to become a bit too paint by numbers. Metro Last Light manages to preserve everything that made the original game's atmosphere so effective, and improves on almost everything else. The shooting is better, the narrative is more engrossing. Basically, it took the Metro 2033 formula and made it more fun to play. Like Metro 2033, you take on the role of Artyom, a young man born just a few years before the apocalypse, ultimately raised in the underground tunnels of Moscow. But to properly discuss where Metro Last Light begins, I will need to spoil the ending of Metro 2033. If you didn't play that game, feel free to pause the video now and skip to the time shown here, which will jump past any discussion that would spoil it. Metro 2033 ended with Artyom unleashing a salvo of missiles on the Botanical Garden, the area where a species known as the Dark Ones live and breed. It was done in order to eradicate the Dark Ones and, with them, the threat they pose to the human race. It's important to note that Metro 2033 did have a very difficult to obtain good ending, in which Artyom realizes that the Dark Ones are attempting to contact the humans to gain peace, and he chooses not to destroy them. However, Metro Last Light's starting conditions confirm that the good ending is no longer canon, as it assumes the normal bad ending has occurred. Metro Last Light begins with the realization that Artyom has been tormented by nightmares about killing the Dark Ones, and it seems that he harbors some regret from eradicating an entire species. He soon learns that there is a surviving Dark One in the garden, and he is ordered to go and kill it, finish the job. The storyline takes many twists and turns throughout, introducing you to several memorable characters and multiple factions of people spanning different ideologies. And the supernatural segments are used sparingly enough to make them feel very special when they occur. Whereas Metro 2033 faltered in providing a cohesive script, Metro Last Light does a much better job of keeping you engaged and interested from start to finish. It does, unfortunately, rely largely on some spoken dialogue between chapters, and that can break up the immersion. And it also counts on you finding notes in the game world to flesh out the situation. But it also makes great use of in-game dialogue and some awesome scripted sequences to get the idea across, and the final few hours ramp up to a thrilling conclusion. I felt much more personally involved in how the story played out here than I did while playing the first game. My only complaint here is of a very random love scene that they really could have done without. It felt baseless, like someone just said, "We need to force a love scene in here somewhere." Totally superfluous. Once again, front and center in Metro Last Light is the atmosphere. The visuals are some of the best you'll see in any shooter right now. The lighting and texture detail are incredible, particularly with the settings cranked up on the PC. The populated areas feel alive with idle chatter from all directions. Every last NPC feels like they have their own story to tell, even if they're not telling it to you directly. The atmosphere hits a high note when playing through sections on the Earth's decimated surface, where the survival elements of Metro Last Light fully kick in.
I heard about this place. That plane was headed into Moscow when the whole city caught fire. The building where it crashed, that's the entrance to the theater. The ice is thawing up here. It's almost like spring, Artyomich. Maybe we'll live to see the summer.
As you near the expiration of each filter, you can hear Artyom struggling harder and harder to breathe. It made me want to take a deep breath myself. And as you battle on the surface, blood from you and your enemies will splash onto your mask, slightly obstructing your vision, and you'll hit a button to wipe it away. As you take damage, your mask will begin to crack, and you'll need to find another intact one to replace it with before it breaks. And if you're counting on your flashlight, you'll need to make sure you keep it charged with a manual system. Needing to keep track of all these things while battling hulking creatures, avoiding heavily irradiated areas, and worrying about ammo really amps the tension in these areas. And seeing the wonderful visual effects of swirling wind and sun-cast shadows pulls you in even further. The game can even be legitimately frightening at times. The combat with humans in the underground feels decidedly different. You're encouraged to take the stealth approach, and it is definitely the most rewarding. By sticking to the dark areas and turning off lights whenever possible, you can creep around and silently dispatch enemies. The ones that you can try to avoid altogether are often having discussions that serve to further flesh out the plot, so there is always a reason to sit and eavesdrop. One key area where Metro Last Light improves on its predecessor is that these stealth sections feel much more open-ended. There's usually an optimal path to take, but it's almost never going to be the only one that will work. So instead of engaging in frustrating trial and error to find a single winning method, you're free to get creative and go with what feels right. It might not always work, but it's certainly more fun. Another major improvement that Metro Last Light brings is with the shooting. It feels much tighter and more accurate than it did in Metro 2033, and ammo is a bit more plentiful. This means that if your stealth efforts go awry, you still have a fighting chance if you can find cover and take a few enemies out quickly. And when faced with the more nimble enemies on the Earth's surface, shooting feels more like a joy here than the chore it could be in the previous game. Metro Last Light even scratches some of that RPG looting itch. You'll find notes, ammo, filters, and currency on desks and in boxes in the game world. Fallen human enemies will drop their weapons, which can be recovered afterwards. And you'll very often find a weapon that you've never used before, thanks to the extensive customization options. There are various weapon types ranging from long-range pistols to close-range shotguns, but there are also several attachments. You can add scopes for better aiming, suppressors for stealth action, and stabilizers for better accuracy. You can even add a shotgun attachment to end up with 4 barrels. Add to these the secondary weapons like incendiary grenades, throwing knives, and claymores, and you end up with many ways to approach different combat situations, which greatly adds to the replay value of this game. Metro Last Light does have moments of moral choices. For instance, when silently taking down enemies, you can push one button to knock them out, or another button to kill them. This same choice is particularly poignant in certain plot situations. However, the game is not obvious about whether or not these choices affect the outcome at the end of the game. One thing that Metro Last Light has in common with the previous game is that it is a real system hog. The recommended PC specs include an NVIDIA GTX 660 Ti video card and a quad-core processor. The optimum PC specs push even further to an NVIDIA GTX 690, 8 gigs of RAM, and a 3.4 gig Intel i7 processor. That's a pretty pricey machine. But you shouldn't worry too much. I have a decent system with an NVIDIA GTX 650 Ti, and I was able to more than comfortably run Metro Last Light with the visuals scaled down to high, and I still had VSync enabled. As it turns out, this game still looks phenomenal when played at less than the highest settings. But I did run into some technical issues with Metro Last Light, one of them particularly major. I ran into the occasional AI failure, including one where an NPC permanently blocked my progress and required a restart of the chapter.
Boys, I'm here. I can't let you go. How can we buy anything when all we had is back there, and handset charges so much? What? The epidemic?
My son,
I also had a couple of hard crashes to desktop, one of which was the dreaded blue screen of death crash that restarted my entire computer. But the worst bug is a bizarre one that I still haven't found a way around. The first night that I played this game, it worked wonderfully in full screen at my native resolution of 1920 by 1080. However, when I returned to it on the second day, I launched the game and it had reset my resolution to something very low. I was able to get to the options menu, but the resolution field was blank. It didn't display the current resolution and offered no choices for adjustment. When I clicked on the arrow that would seemingly increase the resolution, the game would crash. Every time. I tested and every other game on my computer still worked fine. Still, I tried reinstalling the video drivers, tried reinstalling the game itself, hunted out some config files and tried manually editing them too. But every time I launched the game, it would force the resolution to 1440 by 480. Metro Last Light doesn't offer a choice to play in windowed mode, but you can force it by editing the config file. And when I did this, then the game accepted the resolution I specified. This made the game playable again, but I had my Windows taskbar permanently on screen. A bit of a distraction. Worse, the escape menu apparently doesn't work in windowed mode, so I couldn't adjust settings, return to the main menu, or even quit in normal fashion. I had to Alt-Tab and force close the program when I wanted to quit. Unfortunately, as this review was performed on a pre-release review build of the game, I couldn't exactly check the user forums to see if anyone else was having this problem. But I can certainly confirm that no other games currently on my system are having this issue. In the end, it didn't keep me from playing the game, but it was certainly very frustrating to deal with. One more thing. While this isn't a technical issue, I do have a major gripe. When starting a new game, you have a choice between normal mode or Ranger mode. Ranger mode is a fancy name for hard mode, more difficult with a lower ammo availability and no more HUD helpers. The problem is that the mode was grayed out because apparently it's only available as DLC. It's available right now as a pre-order incentive at no additional cost. But if you don't pre-order the game, this DLC will apparently cost $5. $5 for hard mode. That's f***ed up. And of course, I can't comment on the quality of Ranger mode and whether or not it's worth your money because it wasn't included in the review build. Alright, so let's get to the bottom line. I'm giving Metro Last Light a 4 out of 5. It's a legitimately great game. Between the amazing visuals, the minimal HUD elements, the great narrative base, and the NPC behavior, this game hosts a phenomenal atmosphere. And with the vast improvements to the combat when compared to the previous game, it's a joy to play from start to finish. There's no multiplayer mode here, but that's a good thing because this game doesn't need it, and it could be potentially hurt by it. But there are some serious technical problems with the PC version. The game isn't without mission-breaking AI faults and the occasional crash to desktop. But much more crippling was how the game managed to lock the full-screen resolution of 1440 by 480 and didn't allow me to adjust it. Additionally, I'm appalled by the publisher's choice to make hard mode a pre-release incentive at a future $5 DLC. But I did not factor that into my score as I do not consider this business practice as a game element. The trade-off is that the PC version of Metro Last Light, like Metro 2033 before it, clearly offers the greatest visual presentation of the game. This is one of those games that will make you feel justified in having dumped a load of cash on a powerhouse gaming rig. Plus, this version also comes with an ebook of Dmitry Glukovsky's novel Metro 2033. That's a pretty cool perk. Technical issues aside, if you're a shooter fan and you're looking for a high-quality single-player experience that goes a little against the grain, Metro Last Light deserves a spot in your collection.